The tram filled with people. It was late afternoon and the sun shone on the glass windows. The tram moved slowly along the street. Most people sat quietly. Some looked at their phones. Others stared out the window at the tall buildings. Then a sound cut through everything. It was a scream. A long, sharp cry. The scream came from the middle of the tram. Heads turned. Faces changed. A man stood up. His eyes were wide. His mouth opened again and he screamed like someone who had been hurt inside. The scream did not stop. It grew louder and higher. Some people covered their ears. A child began to cry. A woman grabbed her bag and stood up. The tram felt small suddenly. The air felt thick. People moved away. Two young men stepped back against the seats by the door. An old lady put her hand over her mouth. Others stood up to leave. "Please," someone whispered. The driver looked in the mirror. He tried to keep calm. The tram kept moving, but the scream seemed not to belong in the steady city sound. It seemed to come from somewhere wild and dangerous. The man walked down the aisle. He was not yelling words. He only screamed. He walked past a boy with a backpack. He walked past a woman with a stroller. People moved out of his path as if a wave were passing through. A man who worked nearby the tram tried to talk to him. He asked, "Are you okay?" The man did not answer. He screamed. The man with the stroller stepped backward and fell into the seat. The driver turned the tram off at the next stop. The doors opened and some people ran out. Others stayed frozen, unable to decide. Someone called 000. The police were on their way. A few people filmed the scene on their phones. The video spread fast. By the time the tram reached the next stop, more people were outside looking in. The man kept screaming. He lifted his arms and his voice echoed in the small metal box that carried them. The tram felt like a tiny island in a storm. Then, just as quickly as the screaming had started, there came another sound. A deep, metallic bang from the front of the tram. The lights flickered. The tram shuddered. People screamed for a different reason now, because now they were afraid the tram would stop or worse. A cloud of dust from the ceiling fell like a thin curtain. A smell like burnt rubber filled the tram. The driver slammed his hand down as the brakes made a terrible noise. The tram lurched and then stopped. The doors stayed closed. The man in the aisle stopped screaming for a second and looked up. His eyes were empty. Everyone waited. No one moved. The noise outside grew. Footsteps ran. A voice shouted, "Open the doors." The driver tried the control again. The doors clicked, but did not open. People pounded the glass. The man in the aisle screamed again, louder than before. His voice cut across the banging and the shouts. The tram shook one more time. A warning light flashed on the dashboard. The people on the tram looked at each other with fear. The phone signals were weak. The tram was stuck in the middle of the street, surrounded by taller buildings, and the sun was going down. And then, from the far back of the tram, a sound like a second scream started. It was not the man's voice. It was a low, hard sound, a shout, and then a thud, as if something heavy had hit the tram wall. The tram rocked. The man in the aisle turned his head as if he heard someone else breaking the silence. Everyone felt their hearts beat fast. The driver leaned into the mirror. He looked pale. He said, "Hold on." But the words were small against the noise. Outside, people were filming. Inside, the child still cried. The tram's worn seats smelled like old rain. The pain on some faces looked raw. The man in the aisle took one step toward the back. He screamed and reached out. A woman near him grabbed his arm. He shook away. His hand brushed the stroller. The baby screamed louder than the man. Panic spread. Someone near the front shouted, "Is there a nurse?" A young man with a work badge stood up and moved to the middle. He put his hands up and tried to calm the man. "Sir," he said gently, "it's okay. Sit down. Breathe. Please breathe." The man screamed and then suddenly stopped. For a few seconds, there was a strange silence. Then the man fell forward. He hit the seat in front of him and slid to the floor. People gasped. The driver blew his whistle. Some ran to help. The man's body trembled. He did not speak. His hands were limp. Blood did not show. He seemed like a broken toy. The young man checked his pulse. He called out, "He's alive." Someone else shouted that the police were 5 minutes away. A mother checked her child's scraped knee and tried to comfort the child, whispering soft words. But there was still fear. People were not safe until the police came. News vans would soon arrive at the tram stop, and the videos would go online. The story would be told and reshaped and shared. Whispers of drugs and mental health began. Some people said the man must be on drugs. Others said maybe he needed a doctor, not the police. Voices argued quietly. A woman cried and then tried to stop. A man with a thick jacket began to speak about how it used to be safe to ride the tram. A thin breeze blew through the station. An old newspaper page fluttered by a shoe. The day grew darker. Someone said the man had screamed for what felt like an hour, though it had been only 10 minutes. The child kept crying. The tram's windows blurred with fog. People's phones kept filming like fireflies in the dusk. This was the most shocking moment. It was the moment when a city tool, a tram, used for a simple ride home, became a place of fear. No one knew if the man would wake up and smile, or jump up again, or hurt someone. No one knew if the tram would start moving or sit there for hours. The people waited like held breaths. But the story does not stop there. The man's scream was not the only thing that happened. The tram was more than broken metal and a loud voice. It was a small place where strangers watched each other. It was a place with secrets and with people who had their own troubles. The city outside had its own noise, sirens, laughing kids, buses. Inside the tram, time felt different. Now, let's go back and learn what led to that scream. We will meet the people who were on the tram. We will learn the small things that stacked up into that big moment. Maya sat near the window with her school bag on the floor. She was 10 years old and had big brown eyes. Today she had gone to the library with her mother. Her mother, Clara, had to work late at the hospital. Maya liked the tram because it made a soft sound that felt like a lullaby. She watched the city change and counted the street signs. She liked to see the bakery with the blue awning and the old man who fed pigeons. Beside Maya sat a man named Ryan. He worked in a shop that fixed small appliances. He had greasy hands from the day's work. He smelled like solder and hot metal. He had arrived late at the tram and had no time to stand. He had his lunchbox on his lap. He saw the man when he first stood and wondered why the man looked so upset. Ryan had seen people cry before, but this felt different. He noticed the way the man's hands shook. At the front of the tram was the driver, Mr. James. He wore a uniform and a cap. He had driven trams for 20 years. He knew the streets like the lines on his palm. He liked to greet the same commuters each day and sometimes offer a friendly nod. Today he had had a small argument with his son over dinner. It made him think about small things. He did not like when things changed. He liked the hum of the tram and the rhythm of stopping and starting. Near the back sat a young nurse named Olivia. She had finished a long shift and wanted to go home. She carried a small paper cup with coffee and a medical badge on her chest. She had seen harder things than a man screaming, but never so close on a tram. She felt a ripple of worry when the man began to move down the aisle. She stood up without thinking. There was also Mr. Patel, a quiet librarian with soft shoes. He had been to the bakery earlier and had a paper bag with 2 scones in it. He smiled at Maya when she looked at him. He liked to read. He liked the smell of old books. He had been thinking about a book he would like to start that night. In the crowd were others, students with backpacks, 2 friends laughing a little too loudly, an old woman who hummed under her breath, a teenager tapping his foot to a song, and a delivery driver with a heavy box. Each person had a small life, small troubles like a late rent payment, a missed call, homework not done, an apology they wanted to make. These small troubles are like tiny pebbles. They fall into a quiet pond and make little ripples. But sometimes many pebbles fall at once and the pond's surface becomes rough. The man in the aisle had a name too. He was called Daniel. He did not look like a bad man in the way movies show bad men. He looked tired. His coat was old. His shoes had holes. He stood up quickly like someone trying to leave something behind. His eyes seemed lost. He clutched an old paper bag. No one knew what was inside. On the tram that day, small things stacked up. The tram driver had a worry on his mind. The nurse was tired and her hand shook a little with coffee. Maya missed her mother and worried about whether dinner would be ready. The delivery driver worried he might be late. These little anxieties filled the air, invisible like dust motes. Daniel's mind had its own invisible dust. It had been filled for a long time with shapes and sounds that no one else could see. On the route before, Daniel had sat on a bench under a big tree. He watched people go by. He thought about a letter he had read that morning. The letter asked him to go to court next week. It was about money he did not have. He had been sleeping poorly. He had been on medication that sometimes made his thoughts loud and strange. He had been offered a pill by a stranger at a station earlier. The stranger had said it would help him sleep. He had taken it. At first he felt warm. Then his heartbeat quickened. Then his thoughts turned into a drum inside his head. No single thing turned a gentle person into someone who screams. Many small things do. That is why the news headlines say mental health and drug use, as if those words are keys that open the whole problem. But they are only parts of the story. People like Daniel need help. They need doctors, friends, and safety. They also live in a city that can be loud and unforgiving. Back on the tram, the man had been quiet until his mind started to shout. The shouting was loud and raw. It spread like a smell. People stared. Some froze. Some reached for phones. The young nurse called out for help. A man moved forward and told Daniel to breathe. It seemed like the man's body was full of a storm. When people saw the tram shake and stop, their fear grew. The idea that a metal box could stop moving was frightening. The tram was full of people who were not ready. The beep of the tram's control turned into a siren in the mind of everyone there. The brakes had made a terrible noise, and small sparks flew like tiny stars from the wheel area when the driver slammed them. People had never seen that before. Someone at one of the front windows pressed their forehead to the glass and watched the street. A little girl held her mother's hand so tightly that the mother's knuckles turned white. A man in a business suit whispered, "Stay calm." The young nurse leaned down to the man on the floor and tried to feel his breath. It was there, slow and shallow. She put a small scarf under his head. She closed her eyes for a moment to steady herself. Outside, someone had already live-streamed the scene. The video was being watched by people far away who did not know any of the faces on the tram. People wrote things that blamed others before they knew the facts. 1,000 small fingers tapped on screens and made the moment into something the world could see and judge. The people on the tram felt like fish in a bowl. The tram felt very small now. The light was dim. The scream had left a kind of ringing. The driver tried to speak calmly over the intercom. "Please remain seated," he said. His voice shook. He tried again. "Please, remain calm." The police sirens came closer. Someone at the back heard the sound and wiped their cheeks with the edge of a sleeve. Mr. Patel reached into his bag and offered a scone to Maya. She shook her head no, then took a small piece. The taste was warm and sweet. For a second, the tram felt like a kitchen. Then the man's hand twitched and he sat up. He looked at the ceiling as if he saw a storm. He cried out. That cry was not just a sound. It was like a door opening. The tram filled with a new noise, the sound of people breathing hard, of the driver's radio crackling, of an emergency team calling their names. The police arrived and tapped on the windows. Someone smashed a small hammer at the door lock. The buzz of outer voices made the inside feel smaller. Then, just as everyone thought something might calm down, the tram made one more terrible sound. A loud bang came from the back where the heavy delivery box had been. The box had fallen off and hit the floor with a crash. It burst open and something rolled out. It looked like a metal case. The case struck the tram wall and bounced. The sound was like a gunshot in the trapped space. People froze. No one knew what was in the case. No one knew if the bang meant danger or only clumsy movement. The man in the aisle turned his head toward the sound. He screamed again, louder than before. His scream mixed with the child's crying, with the drone of the police radio, and with the banging from outside. The tram felt like a drum being beat hard. The driver looked at the mirror and shouted, "Everyone stay down." He reached for the emergency door release. The police were at the front. A shadow passed at the window. The tram felt like the middle of a story that had not yet finished. Someone shouted that an ambulance had arrived. The lights flickered again. The man on the floor took a breath and then another, deeper one. For a second it seemed like calm might return. But then, at the exact moment many hoped for peace, the tram shuddered once. Something heavy hit the tram roof with a loud crack. The sound made people scream and drop to the floor. The tram tilted slightly to the side. Outside there was a sound like metal on metal. The driver looked up, eyes wide, and the chapter ends with that crack and with the sound of something, big and heavy, hitting the tram roof. All the faces turned toward the ceiling as if the city itself had reached down to touch them. What had hit the tram? Who had caused the loud crack? The footsteps outside were loud now. The man in the aisle closed his eyes and began to moan softly. The driver reached for the radio, but his hand shook. The tram felt like a boat in rough water.